How do you turn something like this into a big pile of stuff like this? Stick around and I'll show you how. This is a 2-pound ingot of pewter. Pewter is actually just a catch-all term for similar alloys. There are various recipes that can give it slightly different characteristics, but essentially it's a very silvery, shiny metal, even when it hasn't been polished. It's a fairly heavy metal, 3 times heavier than aluminum, although it isn't as heavy as, let's say, gold, silver, bronze, so call it heavy metal light. It's been used for thousands of years, back as far as ancient Egypt and Rome. Of course, back then, it contained lead, and that's actually what a lot of people think about when they think of pewter. But rest assured, today, it's not a problem. This is called Britannium, or Britannia metal. It consists of 92% tin, 6% antimony, and 2% copper, and there's 0 lead, so nothing to worry about there. And Britannia metal is known for the very silvery, smooth surface that it produces. Now, if you're just kind of interested in metal casting, pewter is an excellent metal to start out with. One of the main reasons is its melting point. Pewter melts at, depending on the recipe, 338 to 446 degrees Fahrenheit. That's roughly where you bake a cake. So it's actually a very low melting point compared to other metals. When you get into brass, gold, silver, you're talking 1700 to 2000 degrees. And that means with pewter you can use much smaller, easier to heat vessels, as opposed to having to buy a large forge and a crucible and all of the extra safety gear that goes with the much, much higher temperatures. Pewter is also great for all of the options that you have for mold materials. For instance, wood doesn't catch on fire until it's more than 100 degrees higher than the pewter is when you pour it. I've tested all sorts of different materials. I've used plywood, regular solid wood, MDF, thick cardboard, but my favorite so far has been chipboard, the type you can get at any art supply. This piece is 3-layer chipboard. You can see the individual layers from the side. And for the spacer on the inside of the mold, I use a single layer, so it'll be a very thin piece in the end. You can see on the other side another 3-layer piece. I just designed something really quick for this video to show you the process. Now imagine when the mold is assembled, on the inside it looks like this. You pour the molten metal into the top. It's going to pour down and fill from the bottom, getting all of those little details in it. And when assembled, this is called a billet mold, which is just a fancy term for putting multiple pieces together in order to create a mold. Before we go farther, let's talk tools. This is probably the most specialized piece that I'm going to use in the video. This is called a hot pot 2. You can get it for roughly 50-60 bucks. You can see that it has a pretty hefty heating element underneath and a cast iron pot. You're also going to need some baby powder or just plain talc, an infrared thermometer, and then a regular spoon, wire brush, pliers, maybe a knife, and some clamps. So first of all, I'm going to go ahead and start heating the hot pot. After just a few minutes, you can see here that the temperature on the top of the pewter is at 230 degrees. Keep in mind, underneath, it's much warmer. And as it heats up, you're going to start seeing these little bubbles form at the surface. Now this is in real time, by the way. That molten pewter is going to spread through the whole piece. And within just a minute or so, pretty much the whole pot is melted. Once it's melted, one of the first things you need to do is take a spoon and just pull off the top layer of scum. And left underneath is this beautiful, bright, silvery, molten metal. Now, getting that molten metal out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and assemble the mold. One of the first things that I do is use that baby powder. Now, going back to what I was talking about earlier with the pewter melting point, it's going to melt at 350 degrees, but look at talc. You're talking almost 2000 degrees. That means that talc makes an excellent release agent. Here I'm just coating the entire mold really, really well, just to make sure that it doesn't stick. And then I'll coat the other side as well with an extremely thin layer, sandwich the pieces together, and then you just clamp them. One of the important parts here is I made the pieces perfectly square. That makes them extremely easy to align. Now, anyone who's done metal casting before is probably laughing at me right now because this pour spout is extremely small, especially for the spout that I'm pouring it from. And, well, I'm going to go ahead and show this first attempt just because. Well, that was a fail. The great thing here is, every time you fail, it really isn't a big deal because all you have to do is take that piece, throw it back in, and it'll melt and you can re-pour it. So really no harm, no foul. Let's try again. Okay, that's a bit better. You can see a little bit of that steamy action. One of the things that I've noticed is when you're using chipboard like this, it's going to absorb the humidity from the air, which means that the first time you pour the metal in and it touches all of those surfaces, that humidity is going to want to come out. And that means that you're not going to have quite the detail that you want out of that first pour. So I just take it, put it right back in the pot, and let it remelt. Now let's give it another try. Still not beautiful, but it'll probably work. The one safety element to be aware of is on the side of this mold. It's still pretty toasty. You can definitely burn yourself. That's why you'll see me only handling it from the edges. But look at that. It filled the whole mold, and there we go. We have some nice detail. Hitting it with a wire brush at this point is a good idea because it gets rid of any of the residue that you might get from the mold. It gives you a really good idea of what the piece is going to look like. So now I'll just take it over to my bandsaw. This metal is fairly soft, so cutting it is really simple. The great thing is, collect all those pieces you cut off, and you put them right back in the pot to melt. Now I'll just take it over to the sander, and I'll clean up those edges. The next step is totally optional. You can leave a piece untreated, and over time it's going to naturally weather, especially as you hold it. The oils in your hand will give it a natural patina that'll look really nice. But I want to accelerate that process. I'm using this stuff, Jack's Pewter Black. It's about $30 for a bottle like this, and this is mostly hydrochloric acid along with a couple of other acids. I have some that I've used previously, that's why it looks so yellow. But I'm just going to load the piece into a little wire jig that I bent into shape, really nothing special. The important part is that it's being supported by as few points as possible. And then again, this video is in real time. You can actually see as the silver turns slowly into more gray and then begins getting darker and darker. Now this acid isn't even at full strength. It's diluted with about 5 parts water to 1 part of the Jack's Pewter Black solution. By diluting it, you just control the weathering process, so it goes a little bit slower, and it lets you really control exactly how much of a patina that you get on the piece. And there we go, it's a nice look. After washing the piece off with water, I'm going to hit it with a little bit of steel wool. Fun fact, shearing a steel sheep is much more difficult than... And we're done! Hopefully this has given you some inspiration to give pewter casting a try for yourself. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them below. And if you like this kind of stuff, please like and subscribe because more is coming soon, including this failure. See you next time.